So I am back with Battlefield Europe, a game in the First Battle series by Frank Chadwick. This is a good opportunity. I'm taking this opportunity to look back on my experiences with the game and just capture a bunch of thoughts and impressions about the game. It's what I want to do. I do want to take the time from time to time to get back and reflect on earlier videos made, especially. So I did make a few videos on this game, I think a few months ago. So I'm pulling the game back out and going to talk about it now. Well, I definitely have, right up front, I can definitely say I have mixed feelings about the game. Definitely have mixed feelings about the game. So from there, it's funny because I was going to, up until, I guess, early this morning, I was going to say that I can't really recommend the game. I was going to say I cannot recommend the game. But this morning, as I was reviewing everything that I might want to say about the game, I realized that that is not actually true. I can recommend the game. But I just want anybody who approaches the game to know what they're getting and to know what they're not getting. That, of course, is true of any game, of any war game. But it's especially true of any game that is, well, basically that's unusual. Whether it's unusual mechanics, that's not this game. Or whether it's a very unusual topic, which is the case with this game. So especially games that are quite unusual, it's especially important. I think that the gamer knows what he or she is getting. Okay, so as I reflect on this game, I'm going to kind of go in somewhat chronological order with respect to my experience. So, first of all, when I first saw this game, a picture of this game online, I saw the cover here, and I saw Battlefield Europe, and I saw this great picture of these tanks coming towards you with the, dominating, main battle tank, main gun barrel there, sticking out at you, poking you in the eye. So I saw this and I thought, wow, what is this about? This looks like looks like this could be a really interesting World War II, NATO Warsaw Pact gone hot game. But as you look on, it's not that at all. So the next thing that caught my eye, the long truce is over. Probably a reference to, well, not in my mind. I'm thinking that the long truce is over. Oh, this sounds like the long, what some writers referred to as the long peace, peace in quotes, that the Cold War imposed on many countries involved, East and West. Fast-playing war game in Europe, war game of Europe in the 1990s. 15 battle scenarios. Details, a 32-page briefing book details the clashes and battles that will rock Europe in this decade, 1990s. So that, of course, made me... So first of all, World War III, NATO Warsaw Pact is my favorite of favorites when it comes to historical settings. All historical settings are my favorite, but World War III is probably my favorite of favorites. So I was already interested, modern / contemporary combat, probably my favorite of favorites. So the game automatically was going to catch my eye, and it did. It was automatically going to make me think, well, I got to get it. Even if I wind up not liking playing it, I would still want it in my collection, because if there's one area where I'm kind of after everything, so to speak, it would be, modern contemporary or post World War II, World War III, generally speaking. So anyways, a while later, I saw a copy available online. It's funny because it was advertised as unpunched, which I thought was great. Oh yeah, I get Battlefield Europe and I get it unpunched. Great. When it arrived in the mail, I was surprised when I pulled it out that it was still in the shrink wrap. Now, I know that there's fake shrink wrapping, i.e. games that were shrink wrapped long after they were sitting on shelves and packaged from one store to another. So I didn't immediately think that it was real shrink wrapping. I tore off the shrink wrapping, and I immediately, as I took the shrink wrapping off, I felt something unusual on my fingertips. Flipped it over, right, and what I felt on my fingertips was that really, really fine, like paper dust, and so it's all gone now, of course, but it had come out of the opening here, right? So I opened the box, and all the contents came out, and they all had that fine paper dust. Anyways, bottom line is, yeah, I was pretty convinced that it was real shrink wrapped and had never, been opened from the day it, left the production line. The manual also, this type of glossy cover, if it's been bent, you can see it. You can't put those creases out. You can't pull those creases out, right? So this thing was pristine, and so that was a nice bonus. But anyways, as you can see, I'm really just telling stories and gabbing here. So it is part of the First Battle series. So let me talk about that. The Sands of War. I got the Sands of War, which was my first purchase of the First Battle series, which was before this. Boy, I should talk about Sands of War separately, of course, but it was not a happy beginning. Basically, as a very new wargamer, and I mean very new wargamer, the Sands of War rulebook just felt like somebody's notebook. There were so many apparent gaps. I don't know that they would be gaps to a long-time wargamer, but when I read the Sands of War rulebook for the First Battle series, as I read the rulebook, it just seemed like just had tons of questions. I would read a rules section, and I would already be thinking, well, what about this? And what about that? It doesn't say this, and why doesn't it say that? Now, of course, I learned my lesson that later, get some more experience. Well, actually, that's what happened, okay? I had a very, very bad first experience with the Sands of War, because that was one of the first systems, because, okay, so I'd already failed at Panzer Grenadier. For my first attempt to get into Panzer Grenadier, I backed out of that. So I thought the Sands of War First Battle series would be a better system that I wanted. I wanted at this early point in my gaming a few years ago, I wanted to, get into a system to the point where I was not struggling with the rules, where I could just keep playing more and more scenarios and just have fun with the system and to really get it, right? So that did not work with Panzer Grenadier, kind of backed out of that. And so I thought Sands of War would work. It didn't. The first go around was like, oh my, that really challenged my morale for wargaming, or hex and counter wargaming at that point. But anyways, I went on. So I came back to the Sands of War after I got some experience with how different rule sets are written and how rules are understood, kind of frankly, a lot of the unwritten knowledge that wargamers accumulate with experience. Going back to the Sands of War, I finally got it, especially when I just played it and I just looked past what appeared to be all the gaps and questions. What some of them definitely remain, but just look past it, just play. And especially when I played face to face, and especially when I was teaching another gamer, another war gamer, this system, and that's the Sands of War. Then it finally got to the point where, okay, I got it enough to play. That was good. So that's kind of the first battle series. Not a good start. I finally got it with the Sands of War. So then I come here to Battlefield Europe, and unfortunately, this is quite a bit earlier in the evolution, I think, of the first battle series. In any case, it's not the same scale. It's just not the same rule set as a whole that you get from the Sands of War. So that's something I experienced. I wasn't really too happy about that, but it is what it is, right? The first battle series, I guess, has evolved with each game. Yeah. Okay, so that's the first battle series, and then so then the topics. Okay, 15 scenarios. When you see this, 15 scenarios: Czechs versus Slovak separatists, Albanians versus Yugoslavians, Germans versus Poles, Belgians versus Walloons, Belgians versus French, French versus Dutch, Russians versus Central Asians, and so forth, all the way down to U.S. versus Soviets and Turkey. A fascinating, what looks like a fascinating array of combatants, nationalities. Looks to be a very interesting backdrop to the wargaming. So now, why would this, why would I connect with this? It's going to have to do with two main things. One, I kind of as an adult in the world, as an adult in the world, and as a member of the world, the international stage. I came of age, quote unquote, around 1990, and so this is like the first decade for me. I'll talk about that. And then after I joined the Army, I did serve in Kosovo in 2000, 2001, back again in 2002. But having been in Kosovo, NATO forces, blah, 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 that is a very strong connection for me to, again, the backdrop for this war game. Okay, and I'm going to talk about that. That's significant. Back to 1990. So in 1990, I should also say Battlefield Europe. Okay, Battlefield Europe. I have a lot of, for lack of a better way of putting it, a lot of connection to Europe, I guess. I was a child in Europe in the 70s. I was visited Europe in the 80s, lived in Europe a couple times in the 90s, stationed in Europe in 2002 to 2005, back again to visit a couple times in that decade. I mean, so lots of connections to Europe on a recurring basis over time. So there is that connection, and I'll talk about that. But of note, no, I guess I'll skip that. But so in 1990, I was a student in Europe. Let's see, yeah, I was a student in Germany in 1990. This is well before the Army, so this doesn't have any connection to military stationing or anything. I was a university student, undergraduate student, studying in Germany. Obviously, the wall had just fallen the previous December, and lots of things were obviously happening. So I was back again visiting in 91. I was back again as a student. Well, I'm sorry, not a student. Between graduate and undergraduate, I was back again. What was that? 93. Back in 93. So I'm going to say from 1990 to 1993. Spending time living in Germany, I guess, and being a student during this time period. Obviously, a lot of things are going on, but what's going on? What I'm trying to get at is what's going on between 1990 and 1993 are, as some political scientists and IR theorists have written about. I mean, these are benchmark events that were laying kind of a first foundation layer for basically my understanding of my place in the world. Not just my place as an individual. I mean, our place in the world. But this is like a foundation layer of world outlook. So what are we talking about? We're talking about the end of the Cold War, followed quite a bit later by the dissolution of the Soviet Union. We're talking about the opening up of Eastern Europe. We're talking about the beginnings of the breakup of Yugoslavia and these irredentist movements, civil wars or near civil wars, civil unrest, the breakup of Czechoslovakia. We're talking about the Chernobyl disaster. We're talking about the separation of the Soviet Union, all the different pieces of the Soviet Union. And we're talking about the period where there's a lot of writing on the end of history, New World Order, the end of war. Very heady times, actually. But unique because, again, these were heady times when I was... so in 1990, I kind of woke up from a national, American national and even regional kind of perspective to a certainly European, transatlantic, and somewhat global view, right? So I'm waking up, I'm looking around, and I'm looking at long history. I'm looking at again, transatlantic relationship. The nation state. There was even a period during this time where there was debates whether it was the end of the nation state. There's a lot of stuff going on, obviously, and even I should point out, since we're in an election year, even the domestic political situation in America was very unusual. I'll just say real quickly and move on, but to have a sitting president, a victorious wartime president, lose re-election was a big time. Needless to say, big time. And so I'm looking at all this, and I'm recognizing between 1990 and 93, I'm recognizing that whatever happens, I should not be. I'm going to be overly dramatic about it, but to make my point, whatever happens as the 90s unfold, I should not be sleepwalking through history. The things that are going on are too important to not pay close attention to. Okay. So that's why all of this stuff is interesting to me, because as the 90s unfolded, I paid very, very close attention to the breakup of Yugoslavia, and what that meant for European security, for East-West relations, for U.S.-Russian relations, for the evolution of war. And by the late 90s, then I'm in the army. Then I deploy to Kosovo. So all of these connections to, again, the backdrop of this is my connection to the game. And so when I say that I can recommend the game, I would hope that you have some that you can latch onto something in the general backdrop of the game. If you can't, frankly, I don't know. Well, one of two things would happen. Either you would, if you can't latch onto any of the geopolitical stuff of the 1990s, understanding that we can look back to what the 90s actually were. This game is published in, I think, 1991. It's copyright 1990. I mean, clearly, this game is being designed, developed, and produced in that twilight period between the end of the Cold War and the breakup of the Soviet Union. So this game is looking forward to basically a possible 1990s of all of these smaller regional conflicts, these civil wars, so on and so forth. Obviously, it goes without saying, the history is kind of all over the place. But of course, the way history is, only one thing actually winds up happening. So only one 1990s happens. But all of these scenarios on possible conflicts, I mean, they're all fascinating, especially if you can put your mind back at the beginning of the 1990s. So if you don't have any connection to the 1990s, war in the 1990s, Europe in the 1990s, all the geopolitical stuff that happened in the 1990s and could have happened, either you'll come away from this game having an interest in it, which would be a great thing, or you're going to come away not being impressed by the game itself, the game mechanics. So I guess we can get on to that. As you would expect from a first battle series, a very, very nice battle manual, as they call it. So real quickly, so these, you jump right in. You got the European flashpoints, scenarios for war. So they have this quote from Winston Churchill to Lloyd George. The night the armistice ending World War I was signed, the War of the Giants has ended, the quarrels of the pygmies have begun. So that of course could be used to the end of the Cold War and the start of the 1990s. So you got Czechoslovakia, kind of a background article with maps. If you want background to how Czechoslovakia was a union, the Czech Republic and Slovakia. And then they have the as you have the background context, geopolitical background context. Then you have the scenarios. I mentioned Yugoslavia. Wow, I mean, so Yugoslavia. What happened is pretty much almost every single territory shown here broke away and is now independent. So keying in on the ethnic patchwork of Yugoslavia. So Germany, unification or reunification. Moving on to Belgium. And the Walloons. Scenario for war again. USSR still around for the game. The new sick man of Europe. Reference to the Turkish Empire. And sure enough, it did break up. And not entirely peacefully. Romania. Oh, this is I should also point out, I guess I don't really have a European map, but another reason why I have a connection to all of this is because I've spent some time in just talking about Central and Eastern Europe. I think I've been in every place, every country, except for Montenegro and Bulgaria. So I was in, let's see, I was in Romania, both Czechoslovakia. As a matter of fact, I traveled through Czechoslovakia in 1990 when it was, when all the changes were going on. Tensions were this way and that. Yeah, this exact period. I was in Romania in 91. Summer of 91, I was in Romania after the death of Ceausescu. So for me, this is all and the connections are many. So anyways, you got all these background context articles and linked to the scenarios, the 15 scenarios provided. So then you have the advanced rules. Okay, advanced rules all recognizable from the first battle series: limited missile, morale, reaction movement, command control, cohesion, entrenchments, mines, artillery, advanced artillery rounds, air units, helicopters. So all recognizable, although obviously in this particular incarnation of the first battle series, designing your own scenarios, campaigns. Oh, and this is cool. Completely extra. You get short articles on the armies of all these countries. So you got Albania and Belgium, but to grab something that I might know: Czechoslovakia, Bulgaria, France, Denmark, Germany, Hungary, Greece, Netherlands, Italy, Romania, Poland, USSR, and Turkey, United Kingdom, and Yugoslavia. It's like Yugoslavia, Army Vital Statistics. Again, nice background material, order of battle, stuff for the armies, corps, divisions, brigades, separate brigades, and then nice basic TO&E wire diagrams, all the way down to like an infantry brigade company. An infantry company and an infantry brigade, 1 commander, 9 infantry, 5 medium trucks. It's funny having M60s. T-54s, M60s. Funny, Yugoslavia and its background and its connections with the East and the West during the Cold War. They wind up with M60s and T-54s. And then, again, completely extra, a tank versus anti-tank article, basically, showing the evolution of tank versus anti-tank weaponry and basically engagements. Very interesting. Tactics on the European battlefield, so it's nice background to maybe how you might try to play the rules in the first battle series, unit statistics and point values. Now, I want to say, so to the issue, which I should point out now. I've talked so much about the background, the backdrop to the game. Now let's talk about kind of the flip side. The flip side, and I'm going to get back to that. The flip side is, and let's start with the maps, because that's kind of indicative of what I'm going to say. Typical first battle style maps. Each map is 17 by 11 inch paper maps. This is like light cardstock. So there we go. So 4 maps, geomorphic. What you see here is both, well, let me first of all say that color choice alone is to me completely evocative of Central and Eastern Europe. So no issues there. What I also like is that they're not actually empty maps. So you see here, there's quite a bit of woods, terrain elevation, trails, roads, and so forth. But still very basic terrain. Still very basic terrain, and clearly the maps are kind of antiseptic. Which, first of all, for those, I won't argue whatsoever with people who, with gamers who just don't like the antiseptic feel to maps like this. Completely, can't argue with that at all. Can't argue with it. But for me, I'm okay with it. Let's say for 3 reasons. First of all, they are kind of reminiscent of military maps. Military maps, are not made for framing, right? So they're kind of, well, to me, they're just a little evocative of military maps. And of course, I remember back to my sector map in Kosovo, so that I carried with me, and I actually have it somewhere. I think I mentioned this once before. If I ever find it, it's coming out. But yeah, they're kind of evocative of military maps. Second, they're very utilitarian. They're very easy to read, which again is what you want in a military map. Very easy to read, very crisp, clear graphics. So very useful, utilitarian, very useful. And related to that, very important, I think, is related to being useful is that when the pieces are on the map, okay, there's a red piece or a blue piece and a and a red piece, right? So when the pieces are on the map, the map doesn't interfere with the pieces, right? The pieces clearly do not disappear into the map at all. The pieces look nice against the map, which is how it should be, in a sense. Again, well, that's an opinion. That's how it should be, I think. The focus should be on the pieces, not to completely discount, the role of the map, but The focus should be on the pieces, and when you have maps like this, the pieces stand out properly, and that's good. And related to that, the third point is that I've really come to feel that war game maps, they don't need to be beautiful. That should not be the I'm sorry. Related to this is that I'm saying wargame maps don't need to be beautiful because I don't think wargame maps, I no longer think that wargame maps should be judged separately or independently. I think today, and maybe it's always been like this, I don't know, but I just know since I've gotten into the hobby full-time a few years ago, there's too much reference to what the map looks like by itself. And it's not the right focus. Okay, it doesn't matter what the map looks like on its own. Again, I'm not going to be framing it. I'm not going to be putting it under the glass on the coffee table. That's not its purpose. It has a purpose in the game. How beautiful it is or not beautiful it is isn't even relevant. So bottom line is I no longer think that maps should be judged separately like this. I'm laying them out. I'm talking about them. I don't think they should be judged like this. I think they should be judged when you are fully playing. Stop in the middle of a scenario and then critique the map. I guess is one way to put it. The pieces are fine. Of course, they did a really horrible job putting black on this really dark blue. They could have changed the black to something else, but actually I think they just should have used a lighter blue. That's a real design fail, but yeah, it is what it is. The black on red is fine. I just hit my camera. I guess I did. Here's the original die. That thing's dangerous. This is a hazard right here. They should have come with a safety warning. I consolidate all my dice these days, but because this one's so odd, yeah, I'm leaving it with the game. Okay, so here's the next thing. The pieces. They could be seen as very, well, they are very generic. Well, actually they are generic. There's no way around it, right? They're generic. So what's interesting, of course, under the circumstances, that you could have a red Leclerc MBT going up against a leopard 1A5 blue 4. Now I just messed up my organization. No. And basically you can have like West or Warsaw Pact equipment going against Warsaw Pact equipment. Pretty interesting. You know what? I'm gonna wrap this up. Wrap up the video. No doubt that the game mechanics are first battle type, which can be very. By the way, these are the rules. It's just not including the advanced rules that I mentioned in the battle manual. So rules are really simple. What's a good indication of that, or what's a good example of that? Incredibly basic CRT. Luckily it's a 10-sided die, not a 6-sided die, but we're talking very, very simple. Pin, damaged, destroyed. It uses straight column, combat ratios, attack factors, defense factors. And this produces very kind of sterile, kind of boring combat results. Not very interesting. And these are all legitimate drawbacks from this game. But to wrap it up, and I know I didn't really talk about the mechanics, but I do have the earlier playthrough videos. First battle series alone, lacking a lot. The game mechanics themselves are bordering on simplistic. But the backdrop is just fascinating if you can mentally get yourself into the backdrop. There's nothing else like it. So I guess what I'm going to say at the end is that this is the type of game that really asks to be completely redone. Take a look at what happened in the 90s and still consider what could have happened in the 90s, but bring out a lot of the flavor and detail of the armies and so forth. So that's Battlefield Europe. For the first battle series, Frank Chadwick, GDW.